is the famed singer Norah Jones. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. We're in Lansing, Michigan, at least our guests are, in the capital of Michigan, talking about the legislation that was signed off on yesterday by the Michigan Governor, Rick Snyder. Our guest, Sandy Potter, Corrections Officer, State Vice President of Michigan Corrections, the Michigan Corrections Association, and head of the Republican Advisory Board for SEIU. And we're also joined by Lee Fang, who's an investigative reporter who writes for, who has been writing pieces for The Nation covering money and politics, conservative movements and lobbying. Lee, you wrote the piece, Pro-Right to Work Groups in Michigan Outspend Union Counterparts. Lay out who's behind these bills at this time.
Well, Amy, thanks for having me. The Michigan Chamber of Commerce and many business groups have been pressuring the governor for the past few weeks to pass right to work. But my piece looks at the broader kind of unorthodox lobbying infrastructure that conservatives have used to pass anti-labor legislation throughout the country. In Michigan, there are two large groups that have played a deciding factor here. The Mackinac Center, it's a local think tank in Michigan that kind of mirrors the conservative think tanks in D.C. like AEI or the Heritage Foundation, but the Mackinac Center is only focused on Michigan politics. They provided a lot of the intellectual cover for Snyder to make this move. And Americans for Prosperity Michigan is the chapter of the grassroots group founded and financed largely by the Koch brothers. They've been providing the grassroots support for this bill. They've been organizing their members to hold rallies, make phone calls in support of passing right to work.
Lee Fang, how do these groups that you've just mentioned, the Americans for Prosperity in Michigan and the Mackinac Center, how do they compare with Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin and Ohio's Buckeye Institute?
The Mackinac Center is part of a 50-state network of conservative think tanks. Many of them all push the same policies, or pardon me, they push very similar policies, and they work closely with these grassroots groups like Americans for Prosperity. In Wisconsin, the McIver Institute, a sister organization to the Mackinac Center, was there to put out studies and pressure Governor Walker to go after public employee unions. Similarly, Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin was there to hold rallies and sponsor advertisements to encourage him to push that bill. The same type of strategy was employed in Ohio, where another sister think tank, this one called the Buckeye Institute, played a similar role, putting out studies calling for Governor Kasich to go after the unions in that state. Again, the business lobby from the Ohio Chamber of Commerce also played an important role here. But these ideological groups that are very media savvy, they're trained for the 24-hour news cycle. Many of them have their own local media outlets. For example, the Mackinac Center in Michigan has two of its own media outlets. They're very good at sustaining pressure and providing the political encouragement for these governors to take these anti-labor moves.
We want to play for you an excerpt of a speech given last year by the Executive Director for Americans for Prosperity Michigan, Scott Hagerstrom. He was speaking at the Conservative Political Action Committee's annual conference, revealing his group's real goal is to, quote, take the unions out at the knees.
Like any organization, unions want to grow and get larger. So to get larger, the area of growth is government. And in order to get even larger, they have to grow government. They have to raise taxes. They have to increase regulation, more employees, more employees. So we fight these battles on taxes and regulations. But really what we would like to see is to take the unions out at the knees so they don't have the resources to fight these battles.
Your response, Lee Fang.
Well, Americans for Prosperity was founded in the mid-'80s by David and Charles Koch as kind of the grassroots organization to advance conservative policies. But over the years, there's evidence to suggest that the group has largely functioned as an appendage of Koch Industries and their political agenda. In the early 90s, they were organizing citizens to oppose regulations on acid rain. In recent years, they've been organizing citizens to oppose efforts to address global warming, and both of those policies were deeply opposed by the company Koch Industries. Americans for Prosperity over the past 2 years has taken a leading role in going after labor unions. David Koch has gone on record saying that he supported what happened in Wisconsin, and he's going to be using his political advocacy organizations to do similar efforts across the country. So it's not surprising that Americans for Prosperity is taking a leading role here in Michigan. And unlike other advocacy groups that might focus on supporting or trying to solve various problems in society, Americans for Prosperity is more about increasing the raw political power of Koch Industries.
Lee Fang, you write about the billionaire Davos's family's efforts to control public policy debates through state-level nonprofits. They're major backers of right-to-work legislation in Michigan and elsewhere. As far back as 2002, Dick Davos discussed how the conservative movement should fund more grassroots advocacy groups to pursue policy goals.
Where is the battle going to be fought for the future? In my view, it will be, and at this point it needs to be fought at the state level, utilizing vehicles such as GLEP and others nationally, but ideally these organizations must be constructed locally. They need to be constructed with individuals such as the staff we had in Michigan who were intelligent and connected with the local grassroots politics of what was going on, that had the relationships, the insights, and the political sensitivity to know what was happening.
Lee Fang, that was Dick Davos. Can you talk about his significance both in Michigan and nationally?
Well, Davos comes from a very prominent family in Michigan. His father founded the Amway Corporation, and the Davos family has played a critical role in financing the modern right. They help provide the funds for some groups, again, like the Heritage Foundation and some of these large conservative think tanks. They're very prominent in Michigan politics as well. Davos ran for governor in 2006 as a Republican. His wife was a leader of the Republican Party. And for some time now, they've been pressuring Republican leaders in Michigan to enact right to work.
Lee Fang, isn't it true? His wife, Betsy DeVos, prominent Republican in Michigan, is the sister of Eric Prince, who is the founder of Blackwater.
Pardon me. The DeVos family has gone on record that they've been pressuring Republican politicians to support right to work. They financed and supported Americans for Prosperity in Michigan and the Mackinac Center, the two groups I mentioned earlier. And a group founded just last month, the Michigan Freedom Fund, which is connected to the DeVos family. It was registered by the former campaign manager for DeVos's gubernatorial run. They spent over $1 million in ads encouraging the public to support Snyder's law, this right-to-work legislation.
I want to go back to Katie Oppenheim. Katie Oppenheim, you're a nurse as well as a union member. Can you talk about how this right-to-work legislation will affect you personally?
Well, for us as nurses, this is about our patients. This is about us having the things that we need to best take care of our patients. And through collective bargaining, we've been able to negotiate things like safe patient-nurse ratios, safety equipment for our patients, and adequate rest for nurses between shifts so that they're not doing things like working 20 hours, sleeping for 4, and coming back and being expected to take care of patients, which isn't safe for nurses or for patients. So this legislation is really just another example of the corporatization of healthcare in this country, where profits are more important than the patient care, and nurses are the front line, most important people in terms of being able to protect our patients and care for them.
And the issue of anti-choice legislation that is before the legislature and also been passed, how it would affect your patients, what that legislation is? Well,
I've been a women's health nurse for over 35 years, and this legislation, which is pending currently here in Lansing, would be devastating to women's reproductive rights. It would allow providers to refuse to provide care for any reason that they choose. That includes not only abortion care, but prescription birth control and other things, as well as unnecessary requirements for technological equipment in order to be able to provide abortions, which in essence would eliminate abortion care in the majority of the state of Michigan. And the other thing would be private insurance companies. All private insurance companies could refuse to provide abortion coverage in their policies, making it a requirement for women to purchase a rider in case they were to ever need an abortion. So these are just all more slams against women, in particular poor women and women of minorities.
Finally, Andy Cooper, is the Republican Party divided? Can you talk about the climate right now in Michigan? You, as head of the Republican Advisory Group within the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, Andy Potter, if you can talk about what's happening within, you're a corrections officer, you're the state vice president of the Michigan Corrections Organization. Legislation is being considered now that would lead to the privatization of prisons. How are things breaking down in terms of Republicans and Democrats and within your own corrections officer union?
Well, corrections officers are primarily Republican for the most part, and I can tell you there's a huge growing dissent because I believe they see through most of this and see it for what it is. It's an attack on them as working class, middle class, and it's just one more attempt to reduce labor and to, as you heard earlier, take the resources out so there's no leverage. And when you work in a prison, you need as much protection as you can possibly get, as you can imagine. And so there's a growing number that are extremely dissatisfied and upset.
Well, we're going to leave it there, but certainly continue to follow this issue. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Andy Potter, corrections officer, head of the SEIU Republican Advisory Group. Thanks so much for being there. Katie Oppenheim, thanks for joining us, registered nurse president of University of Michigan Professional Nurse Council. And thank you so much to Lee Fang in California and San Francisco, reporting fellow with the Investigative Fund at the Nation Institute covering money and politics. We'll link to your piece. Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.